The road curved like a scar through the trees, and Logan Price followed it without blinking. The old Ford groaned beneath him, tires crunching gravel as the forest pressed in on both sides. In the passenger seat, Ranger sat still, ears sharp, head slightly tilted, watching the road ahead like he understood where they were going. And why. Redwood Valley hadn't changed much. The trees were taller, maybe. The town smaller. But the air still carried that mix of pine and earth that used to cling to his grandmother's sweaters. Logan hadn't been back in over 20 years. Not since the army. Not since everything went wrong. He was 44 now. Skin weathered. Eyes hollowed from nights he couldn't sleep. His left leg ached with every push on the clutch, the price of a roadside bomb outside Kabul. And his hands, those damn hands, they shook sometimes. Not from fear, from memory. The truck crested the last hill, and there it was, the clearing, the treehouse. It looked like something out of a forgotten fairy tale, only half sunk in reality. The oak tree still stood tall, its limbs tangled in moss and sky, but the structure above looked on the verge of collapse. Rotted planks, rope ladder torn. Yet somehow it was still standing, like it was waiting. Logan turned off the engine. The silence hit hard. He opened the door and stepped into the crisp air, the smell of damp leaves and cold dirt rushing into his lungs. Ranger jumped down beside him with a low woof, then froze, ears pricked, body stiff. "What is it?" Logan murmured. Ranger let out a sharp bark and bolted to the base of the oak, nose to the bark, circling, sniffing, growling. The dog's body lowered like he'd found something not right. Then he started pawing at the roots. Logan limped over, heart picking up. Ranger was trained only by instinct, but that instinct had saved Logan more than once. He knelt beside the dog, brushing away moss and old pine needles. And then he saw it. A panel, roughly the size of a shoebox, sunken into the tree itself. It wasn't natural. Someone had carved it. His fingers traced the seam. It wiggled. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the multi-tool he always carried, and wedged the blade under the edge. A soft creak. Then the panel popped open with a puff of dry air. Inside was a small wooden compartment lined with dark fabric. A pouch, old leather, worn, and a folded letter. His throat tightened. His grandmother's handwriting was unmistakable, loopy cursive, neat, full of patience. He stared at the pouch for a long second before opening it. Gold. Not coins he recognized, but heavy, marked with eagles and symbols he couldn't place. Not a fortune, but not nothing. He turned them in his hand, stunned. They were real, cold, solid, hidden away for who knew how long. He unfolded the letter. My dearest Logan, if you're reading this, then the world has weighed you down enough to come home. I couldn't give you much in life, but I saved what I could. You may not understand now, but this tree still has more to offer. Trust your instincts, and remember, some things grow stronger with age, like roots, like you. Love, Grandma Elsie. He sat back hard on the damp earth, the letter trembling in his hand. Ranger came close, nudging his shoulder. Logan exhaled slowly. For a man who had seen the worst parts of the world, this moment somehow rattled him more than any firefight. Not just because of the gold, but because of the feeling that she had always known he'd come back. He looked up at the treehouse. It was barely holding together. But like the letter said, some things grow stronger with age. By late afternoon, Logan had cleared enough brush to approach the ladder. Most of it was rotten, but a few rungs held. He tested each one, climbing slowly, muscles screaming from disuse and old pain. Ranger barked below, pacing like a sentry. The last rung cracked under his foot, but he heaved himself up onto the main platform. The interior smelled of dust and wood rot, cobwebs in corners, a broken lantern on the floor, walls warped by years of rain. But it was hers. Every nail, every beam, built with her hands. He sat down, back to the trunk, the letter still in his grip. He didn't come here looking for gold. He came because there was nowhere else left. No family, no job. Just a German shepherd who refused to leave his side, and a place that had once felt like hope. The pouch of coins sat between them on the floor. Ranger padded up the ladder and crawled into the treehouse like he'd done it 1,000 times before. He lay next to Logan, eyes on the door, body still alert. "Guess it's just us now," Logan muttered. "Again." Ranger thumped his tail once. Outside, the sun dipped low, and wind rustled the branches. Somewhere, an owl called, and beneath it all, the old tree creaked. Not in protest, almost like it was whispering, "You're not done yet." By morning, fog wrapped the trees like gauze. The old treehouse sat quiet, but inside, Logan hadn't slept much. The pouch of coins remained on the floor where he'd left it, the letter from Grandma Elsie folded beside it. Ranger had slept light, ears twitching at every creak in the wood. And now, as the first slants of light filtered through the cracks, the dog was already moving, nose pressed to the walls, body tense, tail low. Logan watched him from where he sat against the wall, sipping cold coffee from an old tin. "What is it, boy?" he asked quietly. Ranger didn't look back. He sniffed one spot on the far wall, growled low, then moved again. Back and forth, always returning to the same point. It wasn't just curiosity, it was focus. "Okay," Logan muttered, setting the cup down. He stood, his knees popping, his bad leg aching from the night on rough boards. He walked over and knelt beside Ranger, ran his hand over the wooden plank. No obvious seams, no gaps, but the wood felt different, slightly hollow underneath. Warmer, somehow like something had been touched here more often. A soldier learns to trust patterns. And this? This was a pattern. He didn't pry it open. Not yet. Instead, he pulled the letter from Elsie again and read the last lines once more. "There are things you only discover when life becomes too heavy to carry. Some of what I left behind is for you, some for others, but none of it is for hiding." Logan leaned back, the letter in hand, his mind racing. She had been dirt poor, lived off canned goods and garden squash. So where had gold coins come from? And if that was just the first hiding place, maybe the treehouse wasn't just a childhood fort. Maybe it was her vault, her message, her last stand. Outside, the wind picked up. Pine needles whispered across the clearing. Logan decided to stay. For now. By noon, he had begun fixing the ladder. It took time. He scavenged what boards he could from the collapsed shed beside the oak. It wasn't pretty, but it was stable enough for daily use. Each nail driven felt like a small promise to stay grounded. He swept the floor inside, reinforced the sagging corner with a length of rope. The place wasn't warm or safe yet, but it was home in a way he hadn't known since returning from the war. Ranger stayed close, alert. Later that afternoon, Logan drove into town. He needed nails, rope, coffee, maybe even new boots. Redwood Valley's main street hadn't changed much. A diner, a post office, hardware store with a rusted-out Coca-Cola sign. Inside the hardware store, as Logan loaded supplies into a cart, a voice behind him stopped him cold. "Logan Price. Never thought I'd see that name on a receipt again." He turned. Grace Walker. She stood in the aisle holding a bag of screws, wearing a navy utility jacket and jeans that bore signs of real use. Her auburn hair was pulled back, and her face, slightly older than he remembered, still carried that fierce steadiness he always admired. "Grace," he said, surprised. She smiled, soft but genuine. "You look like you've wrestled a bear." "I lost." She laughed once, quiet and warm. "I heard you were back. Figured it was just rumor." "Not rumor, just necessity." Her eyes lingered on him a second longer than expected. Then she glanced down at the cart. "Treehouse repair?" "Trying to make it livable. It's the only roof I've got right now." "Still standing?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Barely." She nodded, thoughtful. "You're staying?" Logan hesitated. "Don't know yet. Guess I'm waiting for a sign." At his side, Ranger let out a soft chuff. Grace looked down. "And who's this?" "Ranger. Picked him up from a shelter a couple years ago. He keeps me alive." She knelt slightly and offered her hand. Ranger sniffed it, then licked her fingers once before sitting. Approval. "I'd trust his instincts," she said, standing again. "He seems smarter than most people I meet." They spoke for a few minutes. She didn't ask about his time overseas, and he didn't offer. But there was something unspoken between them, like they both knew what silence sounded like when it was too loud. Before parting, she pulled a small card from her wallet and handed it over. "I work out of the community office now. Legal aid, mostly land disputes and domestic violence cases. Call me if you need help, or if you just want to talk." Logan tucked the card into his coat without looking. "Thanks." As she walked away, Ranger watched her go, tail flicking once. Back at the clearing, Logan unloaded the supplies, fixed a cracked board near the entrance. He hung a lantern, patched a leak with duct tape and tarp. The air smelled of sawdust and bark. Ranger prowled the treehouse again, nose pressed low, and stopped once more at the same point in the floor. That same rough plank. That same growl. Logan crouched beside him, laid his hand on the wood and whispered, "There's more here, isn't there?" Ranger didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said enough. Logan didn't pry it open yet. But now, he didn't just suspect. He knew. Grandma Elsie had buried something in this tree. And it wasn't just gold. As the light faded, he sat on the edge of the platform, with Ranger leaning against his leg. The clearing was quiet, the kind of quiet that made a man think. He thought of Grace, of Elsie's letter, of Ranger pressing into danger without hesitation. And for the first time since his return, Logan felt something stir beneath the weight he carried. Not fear, readiness. The third morning in the treehouse broke cold and clean. Light sliced through the canopy, casting streaks of gold across the wood floor. Logan knelt beside the warped plank Ranger had been obsessing over. The dog sat silently at his side, eyes fixed, tail still. No bark, just that deep, knowing stillness. Logan ran a hand across the plank again, pressing along the edges. This time, it clicked. A subtle give beneath his palm. He grabbed his multi-tool and eased the blade between the boards. The wood protested, creaking loud in the quiet morning, but finally lifted free. Below, nestled inside a hollow cut directly into the trunk, sat a steel box the size of a small suitcase. Rusted at the corners, sealed shut, cold to the touch. He pulled it out with both hands and laid it on the floor. Ranger leaned forward, sniffing it once before sitting back, ears alert. Logan hesitated, heart hammering. Then he jammed the flathead into the latch and pried. It popped open with a sharp, metallic crack. Inside, layers of cloth, faded and stiff with age. Logan peeled them back slowly. Bearer bonds, stock certificates, dozens of them, bundled in wax paper, each marked with familiar logos and names. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, dated from the early 1980s. He stared, not breathing. His fingers trembled as he picked one up, ran a thumb across the printed seal. All legit. It was impossible. He reached deeper and pulled out a smaller pouch tucked beneath the certificates. More gold coins, heavier, stamped with old dates. Alongside them, a sealed envelope marked in familiar cursive. Logan sat back, legs folded, and opened the letter. My Logan, if you found this, you were meant to. I did not bury this treasure to hide from the world, but to give the right person time to carry it. You. I invested early, not because I was smart, but because someone once believed in me when I had nothing. These papers, these coins, they're not mine anymore. They never were. They're seeds, meant to grow something better. Use them to survive, yes, but more than that, use them to lift others. Don't let fear or greed rot what was built with care. Elsie, he didn't move for a long time. Ranger leaned against him, warm and steady, grounding him like he always did. $200 million, maybe more, hiding in the roots of a tree, left behind by a woman who'd once sewn other people's curtains for a living. Logan folded the letter slowly, hands still shaking, and placed it back into the box. He repacked everything just as carefully, sealed it shut again, and tucked it under the floorboards. Then he replaced the plank and sat in the center of the treehouse, staring at the knot in the wood. He didn't know what to feel. Not joy. Not yet. Just pressure. Later that afternoon, he called Grace. She showed up an hour later, hair tied back, jacket zipped high, clipboard in hand like she'd come straight from court. When she climbed the repaired ladder, Ranger wagged his tail once, then stood between them like a sentinel. "What's wrong?" she asked. Logan didn't speak, just handed her one of the Apple certificates. She took it, looked at it, then again. Then her eyes flicked up to him, sharp. "Where did you get this?" He lifted the floorboard, showed her the steel box, the coins, the other documents, then the letter. Grace sat down across from him and read silently. Her expression stayed tight. When she finished, she placed the letter in her lap and let out a slow breath. "This is real," she said. Logan nodded. "Too real. Do you know what this means?" He nodded again. "I do now." She looked him dead in the eye. "Then you need to keep this buried, at least for now. Do not tell anyone, not the county, not the bank, not even the sheriff." He didn't argue, just leaned back against the tree wall, watching Ranger circle the edge of the room again. "What if someone already knows?" he asked quietly. She frowned. "Why?" "Because Ranger's been acting off, always watching the woods, always sniffing the air like something's out there." Grace looked around, then back at him. "Dogs sense things. Maybe it's just your nerves. Maybe. Or maybe this place isn't as forgotten as it looks." As dusk fell, she packed up the documents and slid them back into the box. "Keep it locked. Keep it close. I'll do some digging. Quietly. But for now, you don't move fast. Don't spend anything. And don't let anyone up here unless you trust them with your life. I only trust one." He looked down. Ranger stared back, amber eyes unblinking. Grace managed a small smile. "Then keep him close." That night, Logan didn't sleep. He sat on the platform with a blanket draped over his shoulders, Ranger curled beside him, both staring into the woods. At one point, just before midnight, Ranger lifted his head. Growled. A shape moved between the trees, too fast to see, too quiet to be deer. Ranger stood, hackles raised. Logan tightened his grip on the hunting knife tucked in his waistband, but the figure vanished as quickly as it appeared. He didn't chase. Not yet. But he knew, deep in his gut, this secret wasn't buried anymore. And they weren't alone. The next morning, Logan was patching the southern wall of the treehouse with salvaged cedar when the first knock echoed from below. Not a visitor, not a neighbor, It was too rehearsed. He stepped to the edge of the platform and looked down. A man in a charcoal grey suit stood at the base of the ladder, one hand resting on the rungs, the other holding a sleek leather briefcase. His shoes were all wrong for the forest, Italian leather, already scuffed with mud. His smile was polite, too practiced. "Mr. Price?" The man called up. "Logan Price?" Ranger stepped forward beside Logan, ears forward, body rigid. A low growl built in his chest, steady and rising. The man kept smiling. "My name is Clay Denton. I'm an attorney representing several interested parties regarding the late Elsie Walker's estate." Logan didn't respond. "I was hoping we could speak." Denton continued. "It won't take long. Say it from down there," Logan said. Clay adjusted his tie, unfazed. "We're prepared to make a direct offer. $8 million. Immediate wire transfer, no red tape. You simply hand over the documents, all of them, and we walk away." Silence. Logan's heart kicked once, slow and hard. 8 million. No questions asked. They knew. Ranger barked sharply, snarling now, lips curled, the message clear. "You've got the wrong guy," Logan said. "I don't have what you're looking for." Denton's smile tightened. "Come on, Mr. Price, let's not waste time. That treehouse you're squatting in, that box under the floorboards. My clients know exactly what's there." Logan leaned forward just slightly. "You threatening me?" "Not at all. I'm offering you freedom, security, peace of mind." "Get off my land." Denton tilted his head. "I'd consider this carefully. People have killed for less." Logan didn't blink. "And people have died trying." Ranger barked again, ferocious and close to lunging. Denton flinched. Finally, he stepped back from the ladder, adjusted his cuffs, and turned toward the woods. "This was the friendly version, Mr. Price. I hope we don't have to send someone less civil." Logan watched him disappear into the trees, briefcase swinging like a weapon. Ranger kept growling long after the man had gone. That night, Logan sat in the treehouse with his old combat knife laid across the table. Ranger lay by the doorway, ears twitching at every sound. The forest was louder now, not with animals, with movement, twigs snapping, footsteps where none should be. He killed the lantern early, sat in darkness listening. At 2 a.m., a crunch echoed outside. Close. Ranger shot to his feet. Logan grabbed the knife and moved low, pressing his back to the wall. A shadow moved just past the clearing. Large, human. Then another. Logan's breath slowed, eyes adjusting. Someone stepped into the clearing. A man. Heavy-set. Hooded. Moving with intent. His hand went to his belt and drew a pistol. Ranger growled so deep it vibrated the floor. Logan's mind snapped into soldier mode. He ducked low, slid the trapdoor open just slightly, and watched. The man circled the tree, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. Logan crept to the opposite edge and dropped silently to the lower deck. Ranger followed, padding like smoke. They watched together from behind the trunk. The man stopped, shined his light up towards the treehouse. "We know it's there," he called. "Just hand it over." Logan didn't answer. The man pulled something from his pocket. A lighter. He lit it and held it near the base of the tree. A threat. Flames didn't scare Logan. But Ranger? Ranger lunged before Logan could stop him. The dog hit the man like a freight train, jaws locking on the man's forearm. He screamed, dropped the lighter. The gun went flying. Logan was already moving, knife in hand. He reached them in 3 strides and pressed the blade to the man's throat. The intruder froze, bleeding, whimpering. "You think this is a game?" Logan hissed. "You come to my home, threaten me, threaten my dog? I was just sent to scare you. You brought a gun. They said you'd fold, that you were a vet. Thought you'd crack easy." Logan slammed him to the ground. "You don't know anything about me." He tied the man's hands with paracord from his belt, dragged him to the edge of the clearing, and left him face down near the road with a warning carved into a plank beside him. "Come again and you leave in a bag." Sheriff would find him by morning. Back in the treehouse, Logan knelt beside Ranger, checking the bite wound. It was shallow, more bruised than cut. But the dog whimpered once when he pressed near the shoulder. "You're good," Logan whispered, voice thick. "You're the reason I'm still breathing." Ranger licked his hand, then laid his head on Logan's knee, eyes tired but watchful. Logan sat with his back to the tree trunk, blade still in hand, watching the woods. Whatever this was, it wasn't about treasure anymore. It was war. And this time, he wasn't leaving the fight behind. The air was still sharp with morning chill when Logan loaded the last of the supplies into the back of the truck. Rope, lantern oil, canned food, batteries, nothing fancy. Just the kind of things you bought when you planned to hold out. Ranger jumped up into the passenger seat, tail thudding once before curling around himself. They were gone just over an hour. Grace had warned him to stop making town runs alone. She'd offered to help. He'd said no. Pride was a hell of a drug. When they returned, Logan knew something was wrong before he even parked. The clearing didn't feel the same. The silence wasn't calm. It was waiting. Ranger stood, ears up, staring at the base of the tree. The ladder had been moved. Logan cut the engine. Slowly, silently, he reached beneath the seat and pulled out the pistol he hadn't fired in years. He checked the chamber. Full. "Stay close," he whispered. Ranger leapt down before him, body low, all business. As they reached the base of the tree, Logan spotted footprints in the mud. Heavy, deep, more than one pair. The trapdoor up top was ajar. They'd been inside. He clenched his jaw and climbed. The treehouse smelled wrong. Sawdust in the air, something overturned. Ranger bolted ahead, nose twitching, weaving through the scattered boxes. The floorboard hiding the steel box had been ripped open. The box was gone. "No," Logan breathed. But then Ranger barked, twice, sharp and focused. Logan spun and followed the sound to the far corner, where the curtain hung torn and twisted. Behind it, tucked under a tarp, the steel box sat untouched. They hadn't found it. They'd found the wrong hiding spot. Left in a hurry. A false compartment had saved him. Relief hit hard, but it didn't last, because something cracked in the brush outside. Logan reached the window just in time to see a man step from the trees, moving fast, too fast, toward the base of the ladder. Then another figure appeared behind them, closing in. He moved to grab the rifle leaning against the wall when Ranger exploded into motion. The dog lunged through the open hatch, teeth bared, landing hard on the first intruder just as the man raised a weapon. Gunfire split the air. The shot missed Logan by inches. He dropped to the floor, heart pounding, ears ringing. Outside, chaos. Ranger snarled, twisting through the underbrush, dragging the man down. But then a yelp, sharp and cut short, rang out. Logan's stomach turned. He ran down the ladder, boots slipping on the rungs. He hit the ground running and found Ranger standing over the attacker, chest heaving, teeth bloody. The man groaned, disarmed. But Ranger's left shoulder was bleeding. Bad. Logan dropped beside him, hands already pressing a rag to the wound. "You're okay," he said, voice cracking. "You're okay, buddy. Stay with me." Ranger whimpered, but stayed standing. The second man was already gone, vanished into the trees. Logan didn't give chase. He carried Ranger back to the treehouse with shaking arms, wrapped his shoulder tight with gauze, whispered promises he wasn't sure he could keep. That night, the treehouse didn't feel like a fort. It felt like a target. The illusion of safety was gone. When the bleeding stopped and Ranger finally lay still, Logan stared at the fire for hours. The box sat beside him. 20 years in war zones, and nothing had rattled him like this. This wasn't survival anymore, it was choice. He picked up the old burner phone Grace had given him and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Logan? I need help." She didn't ask why. "On my way." 20 minutes later, headlights cut through the trees. Grace climbed the ladder with the urgency of someone who'd done this before. Behind her came Sheriff Tom Garrison, a broad, quiet man with silver hair and a badge that had seen decades. He was the kind of man you listened to the first time. Logan hadn't seen him since he was 17. Tom looked around the treehouse like he was assessing a war zone. Grace knelt beside Ranger, examining the bandage. "You did good, buddy," she whispered. Logan sat on the edge of the table, arms folded tight. They knew where to look. They just didn't know where to look first. Garrison asked, "You think they're coming back?" Logan nodded. "Next time they'll bring more." Garrison pulled out a folded map. "Then we get ahead of them." They spent the next hour planning. Hidden trail cameras, motion lights, quiet patrols. Grace drafted emergency filings in case anything escalated to court. Garrison promised to post deputies nearby in unmarked trucks. And Logan? He pulled out every memory of every forward operating base he'd lived in. Every tactic, every fallback plan. The fight wasn't just coming. It was already here. That night, as everyone left, Logan sat beside Ranger on the floor, hand resting gently on the dog's side. "You saved me again," he said softly. "But how many times do I get to ask you to do that?" Ranger didn't move, but his breathing was steady. Logan didn't sleep. The wind picked up outside. Leaves scraped across the roof. In the distance, an owl cried once, then fell silent. He looked at the box again, then at the woods, then up at the stars. The money couldn't just be his anymore. That had never been the point. He just didn't know what to do with it. Not yet. The storm rolled in just after dusk. Thick clouds swallowed the sky, and thunder cracked so loud it rattled the beams of the treehouse. Rain came sideways, lashing the windows like it wanted in. Logan stood at the center of the room, lantern flickering beside him, steel box at his feet, Ranger pacing tight circles. The third letter lay open on the table. It had arrived 2 days earlier, tucked inside a false compartment he hadn't noticed before. Elsie's handwriting again. Fainter, shakier. "If you're reading this one, Logan, then the storm is closer than I hoped. You'll find a way out if you look near the roots. I never built that tunnel for escape. I built it to give someone like you a chance to choose your next step. Not to run, but to regroup." He'd thought it was metaphor. Now he wasn't so sure. Ranger stopped pacing, nose to the floorboards. Growled. His body turned toward the ladder hatch. Logan moved fast, dousing the lantern. Darkness fell thick and sudden. He dropped to a crouch and drew the pistol. A beam of white light split through the slats from below. Voices. They were back. More than before. Logan counted at least 4, maybe 5 different footsteps. They weren't sneaking anymore. They were coming with force. He backed toward the hidden plank where the third letter had told him to look. Ranger stayed close, ears back, muscles coiled. Boots hit the ladder. Logan yanked open the floor panel. There it was. A square trapdoor, camouflaged beneath aged planks, edges bound in tarred cloth. He pulled hard. The hatch groaned, then gave way, revealing a tunnel carved straight into the earth, just wide enough to crawl. He looked at Ranger. "Go." The dog slipped in without hesitation, tail low but steady. Logan dropped in after him, clutching the steel box and pulling the hatch shut above them, just as the trap door to the treehouse burst open. The tunnel was cold, damp, and narrow. Roots clawed from the walls like reaching fingers. Ranger led the way, low and silent, his nose guiding them. Logan could barely breathe. Not from fear, from the weight pressing down, soil, memory, truth. Above them, footsteps pounded the floorboards. Voices shouted, "Find it! Check every wall! They said it was under the floor!" He crawled faster. The tunnel curved slightly, then rose. Ranger paused, sniffed, then pushed at a plank. Logan reached forward and shoved with all his strength. The wood lifted, revealing the outside world, a patch of dark forest about 200 yards from the treehouse, shielded by thick bramble. Wind ripped through the trees. Lightning flashed. They climbed out into the rain. Ranger shook violently, water flying from his coat, then turned to scan the clearing. Logan yanked the satellite phone from his pocket and dialed the sheriff's emergency line. "This is Logan Price, out near Ridgeback Trail. Armed men just stormed my property. I've got proof. I need help. Now!" "Copy," came the dispatcher's voice. "Stay hidden. Deputies en route." Logan dropped the phone back into his pack and crouched low beside Ranger under a fallen log. From their vantage point, they watched flashlights sweep the treehouse windows. Shouts echoed. Someone threw something. Wood splintered. They were tearing it apart. But they'd find nothing. Not the gold, not the stocks, not the man they thought would break. Minutes passed. Then headlights broke through the woods. Sirens, shouts. Sheriff Tom Garrison's voice roared over a bullhorn. "Put your weapons down! You are surrounded!" Flashlight beams turned chaotic. One man ran, only to be tackled by a deputy in the mud. Another froze, rifle in hand, stunned. Logan watched them all get cuffed, faces pale in the lightning. It was over in less than 5 minutes. Logan didn't move until Garrison stepped into the clearing and shouted his name. Only then did he rise, soaked and shaking, Ranger at his side. Back at the treehouse, damage was everywhere. Planks smashed, the ladder broken again, papers scattered. But the steel box, still safe in his hands. Garrison stood beside him, grim-faced. "They came hard," he said. "They'll keep coming." Logan answered. The sheriff nodded. "One of them's already talking. Told us some things you'll want to hear." They sat in the truck while the deputies finished processing the scene. The man who had spilled everything, his name was Porter. He'd been hired by a private security contractor, one that once handled asset retrievals for investment groups long since dissolved. Elsie, it turned out, had been an early member of a grassroots investment club in the late 70s. She and a handful of others had pooled small amounts into tech stocks before anyone cared about Silicon Valley. The club had fractured. Some had died, others disappeared. But the assets remained. And Elsie had quietly converted her portion to bearer instruments over decades, burying the paper wealth in layers beneath a life of poverty. She hadn't hoarded it. She had hidden it, for a reason. The others had wanted to bury the past. She had wanted to repair it. The storm outside faded to a dull drizzle. The forest calmed. Logan stared out at the shattered remains of the home his grandmother built, his fingers gripping the box that now felt heavier than ever. "She didn't want me to run," he said aloud. "No," Garrison replied. "She wanted you to decide." Back inside, Logan sat on the floor beside Ranger, who was still damp but alert. He rested a hand on the dog's head. "Feels like she left me a war," he whispered. Ranger pressed closer, eyes fixed on the door. Logan exhaled. Not from relief, but from knowing the storm had passed. And now came the part that mattered most. What to do with everything that had survived? The storm had passed, but the aftershocks rippled quietly through Logan's bones for days. He'd lived through ambushes in Afghanistan, through silence that was louder than bombs. But this had been different, because this wasn't just survival, this was legacy. 2 days after the arrests, Grace arrived at the treehouse with papers tucked under her arm and purpose in her stride. She climbed the rebuilt ladder like she belonged there, and maybe she did now. Ranger met her at the top, ears forward, tail sweeping low. She scratched behind his ears and said, "Good to see you still on duty." Logan sat at the table, the steel box beside him, unopened since the night they'd escaped, through the tunnel. "We need to make it legal," Grace said, setting the stack of documents down. "The sheriff's reports are airtight. The other parties have no valid claim. You're clear to register ownership of the estate and all holdings." Logan stared at the papers. He didn't reach for the pen. "Feels wrong," he said finally, "to own this, like it was meant for more." Grace didn't speak at first, just watched him. "Then do more with it." He looked at Ranger, who lay nearby, chin resting on his paws, eyes trained on the doorway. Ever alert, always waiting. Logan reached down and ran a hand through the thick fur along his neck. The dog sighed and leaned in. Grace's voice softened. "You know what you want to do. You just haven't said it out loud yet." Logan took a breath, then another. "I want to build something that lasts. Not for me, for people like me, people like my grandmother, veterans who come home with pieces missing, women running from fists and fear, kids without a safe place to sleep." He looked up. "I want to start something called the Elsie Foundation." Grace's eyes didn't waver. "Then let's start it." In the weeks that followed, Redwood Valley changed. Word spread fast. What had started as whispers about gold, stocks, shootouts, shifted into something grounded. Real and different. Logan met with town officials, led by Grace, who now stood at his side not as a visitor, but as a partner. They secured permits, opened accounts, hired contractors, veterans mostly, people who understood how to rebuild because they knew what it meant to be broken. The treehouse was reinforced, but not erased. The same walls that had hidden secrets were now insulated, painted, made safe. The same window Ranger had first barked out of became the intake window for walk-ins needing help. They built ramps, added heat, brought in counselors. It became the first trauma support center in the valley, a safe house in the trees. The Elsie Foundation's mission was simple but ambitious: provide short-term shelter, long-term dignity. They added tiny cabins near the treehouse for families fleeing violence, a greenhouse for job training, a therapy dog program. Ranger became the first. He wore a navy vest with a patch that read, "Emotional Support Guardian." He wasn't trained for it, but he didn't need to be. His presence alone was steadying. Survivors, especially children, found comfort in his calm. He would sit beside them on the porch, tail sweeping quietly, listening better than most people ever could. Logan found himself doing things he never imagined, writing proposals, building bunk beds, sitting in circles with strangers and talking about things no one ever talked about in combat debriefs: loneliness, guilt, memory. Sheriff Garrison checked in often, sometimes to offer help, sometimes just to sit on the edge of the porch and sip coffee beside Logan in silence. The sheriff never said much, but he always brought extra supplies. No one asked who paid for them. One day, a battered minivan arrived carrying a woman and 2 boys. One of the boys clung to a shredded blanket. The woman had bruises that told a story she didn't want to say out loud. Grace met them at the foot of the path. Ranger trotted out and sat quietly by the younger boy. The boy didn't speak, but his hand reached for Ranger's fur and didn't let go. Later that night, Logan found the boy curled up on the floor beside Ranger, both of them asleep. The dog's body curved protectively around him. Logan crouched nearby, watching them. The steel box still sat in the corner of the office, unopened again since the Foundation launched. He could have moved it, put it in a vault. But he didn't, because it didn't belong in a bank. It belonged here, in the background, quiet, like Elsie. That night he opened a fresh notebook and wrote a single line. "The only fortune worth protecting is the one that shelters others." By the end of the first month, there were 5 families living on site. 3 veterans had been hired full-time. A local trauma therapist volunteered twice a week. And the treehouse, once a broken refuge, stood solid in the canopy, lanterns glowing from its windows each night. Logan still didn't sleep much, but now it wasn't from fear. It was from motion, from the sound of rangers' paws padding across the floor, from the soft creak of children walking to breakfast, from the voices of people finding their way back to themselves. And every night before bed, Logan would sit with Ranger outside the treehouse, watching the stars above Redwood Valley. Not as a soldier, not as a man hiding from the world, but as someone who had finally chosen to stay and to share. 1 year later, Redwood Valley didn't look the same. The buildings still wore their age, and the pine trees still stood tall, but the feeling in the air, what people breathed when they walked outside, was different. It wasn't worn down anymore, it was alive. The town square, once nearly abandoned, now held farmers' markets on Saturdays. Children played tag between vendor tables. Veterans worked the booths, selling handmade furniture, vegetables from the new greenhouse, and tools crafted in the small trades workshop just behind the old post office. And at the far end of the valley, where the forest curved in like a protective arm, the treehouse still stood. Brighter, stronger, its wood gleamed with fresh stain, windows reinforced, the porch expanded into a wide deck that overlooked a cluster of small safe-house cabins below. It was now the heart of the Elsie Foundation. The once abandoned property had become a sanctuary, not just for the vulnerable, but for the willing. Logan had refused to call it a charity. This wasn't about pity. It was about giving people a chance to fight for themselves. Each cabin was named after a tree: birch, cedar, oak, willow. Inside them, women rebuilt their lives. Children laughed freely. Men who had spent years numb from war found reasons to wake up early. Logan still rose before dawn, same as always. Only now, his mornings didn't start with a flinch or a flashback. They started with coffee in hand and the sound of Ranger's slow, steady steps along the path. The old shepherd had gone greyer around the muzzle. His joints stiffened quicker in the cold, but every morning he still made the rounds, nose low, tail steady. He checked each cabin, then returned to the treehouse and settled by the door, where he could watch everything, guard everything. Everyone knew him now. Kids drew pictures of him. Volunteers gave him treats. Therapists quoted his name like a mantra when the weight of trauma got too heavy. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a presence, a reminder that loyalty could heal where medicine could not. Grace had grown into her role as executive director, like she'd been born for it. Her office sat in what used to be Logan's sleeping loft. She kept the window open year-round, even in the rain. Said it helped her think. She didn't just run the day-to-day. She built new partnerships, brought in social workers, wrote grants. Every Thursday, she held one-on-one meetings with every single person living or working on the property. No appointments needed, just a chair, 2 cups of coffee, and time. Logan mostly stayed out of the office. His days were spent in the field, cutting lumber, fixing fences, repairing roofs. He liked it better that way. Hands busy, head clear. But when someone needed help they couldn't quite name, a vet who hadn't spoken in weeks, a mother who flinched at every loud sound, a teenage girl who wouldn't make eye contact, they sent Logan, because he didn't talk much. He just showed up. And somehow that was enough. Sometimes he brought Ranger with him. Sometimes he just sat beside them in silence. But always he came back. That spring, a reporter from a state paper visited the valley. She had read about the foundation in a syndicated article and came to see it herself. She interviewed Grace, walked the grounds, toured the cabins. Then she sat with Logan on the front steps of the treehouse, notebook in her lap. "You're not what I expected," she said. Logan sipped his coffee. "Most things worth keeping aren't." She smiled. "If you had to sum up what this place is in one sentence, what would you say?" He looked out at the clearing. A boy was helping a veteran plant flowers. 2 women were laughing as they pushed a wheelbarrow full of tools. In the corner, Ranger stood still as a statue, while a little girl tied a pink ribbon to his collar. Logan spoke quietly. "We don't save people here. We just build a place where they can start saving themselves." The reporter wrote that down. She never published it as a quote, but she closed her article with those words, and that was enough. By summer, more cabins were being built. A second greenhouse was underway. A truck donated by a local company now made weekly supply runs. Volunteers came from out of town, some staying for months, sleeping in tents, offering whatever they had to give. One night, Logan sat on the treehouse deck as the twilight rolled in. Ranger lay beside him, breathing slow. Grace stepped outside and handed him a glass of iced tea. She leaned on the railing. Think she'd be proud? Logan didn't look at her, just stared at the trees, bathed in purple and gold light. She didn't want pride, he said. She wanted peace. They stood like that a long while. The wind moved gently through the valley, and the woman who once hid wealth beneath floorboards was no longer a secret. She was a foundation, literally, figuratively, and in the end, spiritually. In Redwood Valley, they didn't talk about miracles, they just lived them. The afternoon light filtered through the trees like honey, and the smell of pine hung heavy in the air. A yellow school bus rumbled up the gravel path and came to a slow stop just beyond the main cabins. Doors opened, backpacks hit the dirt, and 15 seventh graders stepped out into the world of the Elsie Foundation. They'd come from a charter school 40 miles south, part of a writing program called Legacy in Action. Their assignment, visit a place where someone had made a difference, and tell the story. Grace greeted them near the greenhouse, clipboard in hand, her voice calm and steady. "The man you're here to meet isn't a politician. He's not famous, but what he built helped change this valley." Logan stood on the platform of the treehouse, watching from above. He never got used to people calling him anything other than just Logan. But when Grace asked him to talk to the kids, he didn't say no. The students climbed the ladder 2 at a time. Some moved quickly, others more cautious, all wide-eyed when they reached the top. The interior had been transformed into a storytelling room, books stacked against the walls, photo collages, the original steel box now sealed in a glass case, beside a plaque that read, "What we give matters more than what we keep." Ranger stirred from his spot beneath the center table as the last kid came up. He didn't rise, but his eyes tracked every movement, always watching, always weighing the room. Logan sat in the old armchair, boots worn, hands rough, voice low but clear. "You want to know how this all started?" They nodded. He looked out the window a moment before speaking. "I came back from the war angry, tired, broke. This was just a treehouse my grandma built from scrap wood and stubbornness. I thought it was worthless. I was wrong." He reached over and patted the floor beneath his chair. "Right under here, we found something. Stocks, gold, more money than I'd ever seen, enough to disappear. To live easy?" A girl in a red hoodie raised her hand. "Did you think about keeping it?" He smiled. "Every day, for a while." They laughed, but it was quiet, thoughtful. Another student asked, "Why didn't you?" Logan leaned back. "Because my dog wouldn't let me." They turned to Ranger, who lay still, one eye cracked open, tail flicking once like a shrug. "He knew something I didn't," Logan continued. "He kept barking at the floorboards, kept dragging me to the truth. If it wasn't for him, I'd have stayed lost." A boy with freckles raised his hand slowly. So, if you didn't have Ranger, what do you think would have happened? Logan looked at him. Long. Then down at Ranger, who blinked, stretched, and laid his head gently on Logan's boot. Well, Logan said, then maybe I'd still be up here, sitting on a fortune, and not knowing what the hell to do with it. The kids laughed again, louder this time. He smiled too. The truth is, the treasure wasn't in the floorboards. It was what we built because of it. This place, the cabins down there, the people working together. That's the real inheritance. One of the girls was sketching quietly in her notebook. A quick, light drawing. Ranger's face. Logan watched her a moment. These walls used to hide pain. Now they hold stories. Yours too, if you want. They stayed another hour, took photos, asked questions. Some helped water the plants. One kid sat on the floor and read aloud from a journal entry of Elsie's, dated 1984. It spoke of planting hope in broken soil. The words hung in the air even after he closed the book. When the bus pulled away, Logan stood at the edge of the treehouse and watched them go. Ranger sat beside him, wind tugging at the white hairs on his muzzle. Grace appeared at the top of the ladder, coffee in hand. You did good. They asked real questions. He said. She smiled. You gave real answers. He exhaled, slow. I didn't build this alone. No, she said, looking down at Ranger. You had help. Ranger stood, stretched, then walked to the door, looking back once before descending the stairs. Patrolling, as always, guarding what mattered. Logan followed, steps slower now, but steady, grounded. Because now when people came to Redwood Valley, they didn't just see a man with scars and a dog with grey in his fur. They saw a legacy that lived and breathed and walked beside them. And every time someone asked where it all began, Logan pointed to the old boards beneath his feet and said, right here, because of him. The sky over Redwood Valley burned orange as the sun sank behind the ridge, casting long shadows through the pines. The wind had gone soft, quiet. Not gone, just listening. Logan sat on the edge of the treehouse porch, a chipped mug of black coffee in one hand, his other resting gently on Ranger's back. The old dog lay beside him, chin on his paws, eyes half closed, breathing slow and steady. Below them, the cabins glowed with warm light. Someone laughed from the greenhouse. A guitar strummed somewhere, near the fire pit. Voices drifted upward, the kind of noise that doesn't demand attention, only reminds you you're not alone anymore. The radio on the workbench crackled to life. An old wooden set, patched with duct tape, the same one that had once collected dust in Elsie's kitchen. Tonight, the announcer's voice said, smooth and low. We honor a veteran and his dog, not for finding fortune, but for showing us how to spend it with purpose. Logan didn't react at first, just took another slow sip. The breeze brushed his face, bringing the scent of cedar and soil. Ranger shifted, nudging Logan's knee with his nose. He looked down and smiled. Still guarding, huh, boy? Ranger's tail gave a single thump. Not eager, not flashy, just true. They sat in silence, the kind that only comes when everything that needed to be said had already been lived. Logan glanced across the valley. From here he could see the safe houses, the workshops, the trails the kids had carved into the woods by foot and bike. He could see growth, not of trees, but of people, roots deepening, wounds closing. Behind him, inside the treehouse, the steel box remained sealed in its glass case. Untouched for months. It wasn't about what was inside anymore. It was about what it had sparked. The dog beside him, the one who had once sniffed out that first false plank, the one who had stood between him and a gun, who had stayed through every silent night and sunrise after, had never cared about gold. Only direction, only purpose, only him. The sun dipped lower. The last rays skimmed the treetops, turning the tips gold, like the valley itself was remembering. Logan took a breath, looked down at his companion. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think I came back broken." Ranger didn't move. "I wasn't." He ran a hand through the thick fur at Ranger's neck. "I just hadn't come back to the right place yet." A pause. Then the radio cracked again. "Some heroes wear medals, others wear fur and scars. But the best of them? They don't ask for praise. They just show up. Every day." Logan laughed quietly. "Sounds like they know you, pal." Ranger didn't reply. He just stayed there, old, quiet, steady, watching the world he helped rebuild. The light faded, the valley slowed, and the man and his dog remained side by side, just like always. He didn't dig for gold, he dug for purpose. What's your story with a loyal pet? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to follow German Shepherd, where stories of courage, healing, and second chances live on.